Manever I say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there, I see them yopo.
Mema wakwaba ede ba PENDREAM TV so make sure say obe subscribe to channel no click bell so say the news to our sabe to me aka ntem no watie afa so make sure say obe like na wa comment no share ama afoforo so nsaka na comment section ho so no opese wo kire wa adwen obetimi ede wa adwen kire ato honom na amanfo so anya bia kenkan na onim say PENDREAM TV there eye nsem a ekoso Ghana yam politics mu ne ede ba na yasaka ya ne ede abranti na so me video I saka pese no che na ye dey ba nti me mo modern astro so obehwe video we amana si awie na wa kire wa adwen e comment section na se yenko video
this debt. He was going on about it. If you are going to talk about debt, the NDC is on record in their 8 years between 2009 and 2016 to have contracted over $30 billion worth of debt. The NPP debt over the same period, as we speak, is about 13 billion. So if you're going to talk about debt and responsibility and assign culpability to NPP, you'll be mistaken.
Why?
Because, like I've told you, if we're going to talk about our debt burden as a country and the debt servicing, the NDC borrowed more. They have contributed more to our debt.
Is that how you analyze the effect of debt?
To analyze it.
Because you see, if I borrow 30 billion and I was able to service my debt, I did not declare bankruptcy. I did not impose haircuts on people. I did not go into a debt sustainability program. You cannot compare that to a debt situation that leads a country to declare bankruptcy. That leads a country to give a haircut. In fact, as we speak today, the companies who did not voluntarily accept the haircut, they have not been paid. They are whatever, as we speak today. Although the deputy governor of the central bank a few months ago said that they had settled everybody. The corporate entities that did not opt for the voluntary is still outstanding. Yeah, so you cannot reduce the debt thing to somebody borrowed 30, you borrowed 13. What was the effect of what you borrowed?
The effect of the debt also depends on the debt that you have. Unless you want to tell me that the 30 billion that was borrowed was paid for.
No.
The 30 billion that was borrowed was not paid off.
Okay.
It wasn't paid off.
No.
It wasn't paid off. So you still, the servicing continued after 2017.
Okay. So, Nana,
so it became part of our debt profile.
Between you and I, you have been in government. You've sat in cabinet. I haven't. But at least I know that at the Ministry of Finance, they have this chart about Ghana's our debt. If you go there today, so they know how much we owe, how much we must service at every point in time. So even when we're applying for a loan, they can input it, and you can tell the effect or the impact that you have on the economy. So at every point in time, when you take over a government, you know that per our debt situation, this is the picture. If I do A, this will be the impact on the debt situation. So you take over a government at the point in time when you know that this is our debt situation. When I borrow B, this will be the implication. I borrow C, this will be the implication. And so if you take over and you tout yourself as better managers of the economy, and you start borrowing, and you are told that, look, the way you are going on with your borrowing, because you talk about 13 billion, your Eurobond alone.
Not me talk about it. That's the fact.
No, I'm saying your Eurobond. Your Eurobond alone is 13 billion. Are you aware? Eurobond alone. 13 billion.
And then
all there are other loans. I've not even come there, but I'm saying Eurobond alone. you took 13 billion when between Kufuor and amongst Kufuor, Mills and Mahama, all of them put together was less than 4 billion. And so the implications of your loans, you were aware. The issue of, look, where our borrowing is taking us to, it will create problems. The Ministry of Finance issued statements telling us that what you were engaged in were reprofiling, used all manner of adjectives. Look, to say that you knew what you were doing. What those who were complaining about our debt situation didn't know what they were saying.
But do you agree
for you to take us into the ditch that you sent us into?
Do you agree?
Yes.
That the debts that we're servicing, that we couldn't service largely because of COVID. Do you agree?
I don't agree that we couldn't service because of COVID. I don't agree.
Why couldn't we service?
We couldn't service because we had over-borrowed. We had borrowed to the extent that our debt servicing.
But if you talk about over-borrowing,
yes,
that's the point I'm making. If you talk about over-borrowing, and this is a favorite song of my colleagues here, you borrowed 30 billion.
Yes.
Somebody borrowed 13-point-something billion. So if you're going to talk about over-borrowing, who should you hold responsible?
Okay. And I'm sure you weren't listening to me.
I listened to you carefully.
So now all I'm saying is that you take over a government and you claim that those who you took over from were so incompetent. They didn't know how to run the economy. And your own records show that you took over an economy whose debt to GDP was 56%. 56%. And like I said, anytime, so you are fully aware that per my debt situation, this is how much I need to service my debt for every single year. That is how come when the finance minister presents the budget, if you go to the appendices, you will see what Ghana will spend on debt service, whether it's interest payment, whether it's amortization, whether it's whatever. So you know. And at any time that you go to contract a loan, you know the implications of that on your debt service. And so you know that I require a certain capacity to be able to do ABCD. So even if somebody borrowed 30 billion, but you took over an economy whose debt to GDP was 56%, and an economy which was servicing its debt and was not using 70% of its tax revenue to service its debt. And then you come in.
Then you go into debt exchange. But you would agree that the borrowing that happened under NDC was more than twice what happened at the NPP. So if I'm going to talk about, sorry?
No.
These are official figures. So
what are figures?
These are official figures.
Show it. Show them.
Now, you would agree that your servicing depends on the debt.
Now, so our debt at the time
let me finish.
NPP took over is 120 billion.
Let me finish.
Yes.
120 billion.
Let's stay in Ghana.
Let me finish.
Don't go for
so, but we're staying in Ghana.
Yes. But you're talking about
120 billion.
We're talking about what?
120 billion was our debt, Nana.
120 billion.
Can I finish?
Debt to GDP 56%.
Yes.
I'm saying that
so
what I want to establish very clearly is that when you talk about borrowing and reckless borrowing that they've been saying, if you talk about that, I'll tell you very simply that when it comes to borrowing, NDC borrowed over 30, which is more than twice what NPP borrowed. So don't talk about reckless borrowing.
Where are you getting those figures from?
These are official figures.
From where?
Check from the Bank of Ghana website.
So I'm just telling you
let me finish.
that it was 120 billion. As against the latest figure was 700 and something billion. And then we have the debt to GDP figure as well.
Yes.
Before debt restructuring and current.
You will not take it.
Let your producers check how much NDC borrowed.
120 billion was our debt at the time NDC exited office.
Exactly.
It is reflected in what Kenoforiata told Parliament.
You just check from the Bank of Ghana. It's easy for your people to check. Now, my second point is about the servicing. You would agree that before COVID, we were servicing our debt. Before COVID, we were servicing our debt.
Even during COVID. During COVID, we were servicing.
But the debt exchange, the difficulty came
until recently.
2022 November. We were servicing our debt 2020, 2021, 2022 until November.
Yes. So the difficulties with COVID, as John Mahama said at Harvard, impacted on our ability to service debt. Look, debt to GDP is a ratio, isn't it?
Yes.
So when you have your GDP drop from 6.5 in 2019 to 0.8 in 2020, it would affect the ratios.
You're talking about growth rate, not GDP.
GDP.
Ghana's GDP has been growing.
Yeah.
You are referring to growth rate.
Yeah.
Ghana's GDP has been growing. The economy has been expanding.
Yes, and I'm
so
saying
the debt to GDP, that is what lured you to go into taking all those loans. Because when we did the, how do you call it? We did the...
But you are saying what I'm saying.
No. I'm just saying that you are referring to growth rate, not GDP. Ghana's GDP keeps increasing.
Yeah. But I'm saying to you, listen, when you have your GDP growing at 6.5, and then it drops to 0.8, it will affect the ratios. And that's what happened in 2020. But before that, we're servicing our debt. Or we're not servicing our debt. So, and now we've gone into a successful negotiation that gives us the breathing space. Because this is what we are doing to get ourselves out of the problem. But the basic fact is that when you are going to talk about the borrowing and the difficulty in servicing the borrowing, and you talk about reckless borrowing on the NPP part, the figures do not support it.
No, but
unless you have different figures, give it to us. And let your producer check from the Bank of Ghana.
It is clear that your finance minister came to Parliament in 2017 and was clear, even the president in the State of the Nation address, you inherited 120 billion Ghana cedis debt right from Akomea. Now you're getting to about 800 billion. That is the fact. So, you know, it's a fact.
Can you just tell me how much you borrowed?
The issue is not whether how much I borrowed or not borrowed. Do you accept the fact that you inherited 120 billion, Ghana cedis?
Ghana cedis.
Yes.
Ghana
do you accept that?
I don't know about that.
Oh, you don't know about that?
No, I just know the Bank of Ghana. Listen, I know the Bank of Ghana figures.
And I'm telling
as
you,
to the borrowing.
I'm putting it to you that
and I've asked
you
Randy
inherited
to check.
a debt of 120 billion Ghana cedis. And that was clearly stated by the president.
And then what is it now?
It's close to 10 billion.
But you know, you would agree.
No,
honorable. So, you are honorable man.
Do you agree to that?
Do you agree with one second. I haven't checked.
Okay.
But even if
even
if I take your word for
Doc,
it.
can you ask your
let me just
check for us?
Even if
the debt details of the state
in cities. But even if I take even if I take
122 billion
cedis.
Yes.
But even if I take your word for it, you know that the CD value of the debt is affected by the exchange rate.
But
that affects everybody.
It affects everybody.
With NDC.
That's why I'm denominating in dollars. So that it's not affected.
Why?
But those are the actual.
But you generate cities. Why do you?
So, but the borrowing.
Look at
the borrowing is.
Please, you can look at the data.
Okay, so what is it? What is it?
Look at it.
So Ghana accumulated debt. I'm asking for how much NDC. Listen, what I'm asking your producer to do is how much NDC borrowed and how much NPP borrowed. That's all. Let him.
But are you okay with this one?
What is this one?
So it's telling you, as of 2016, the details were 122.1 billion Ghana cedis.
Yes.
Okay, as of 20.
But I have told you that the CD, as for the CD value,
the impact really about debt is that even if I borrowed 100 billion,
and you borrowed 30,
even if I borrowed 100 billion, and I am able to pay
the servicing,
I'm able to service my debt. That is how come you have countries whose debt to
is
GDP
100%.
is even more, over 200% and all that. But they have the capacity
to service
their debt.
Yeah.
It is when you are unable to service your debt, that is the debt sustainability.
And you and I have agreed.
So when you are when you claim to be an astute manager of the economy, and you claim to be more efficient and capable than others, that must be demonstrated.
Yes, but you would agree
by how you go about it.
Okay, but you would agree that
but
COVID plays a big impediment on our ability to serve.
Why?
So
what did he do?
You may have no impact
the
at all.
COVID that gave us 33 billion. What did he do?
You may have no impact at all.
I didn't
what
say
did
no.
you say exactly what he did?
I'm saying the COVID that gave us 33 billion.
Yes.
Yes. How did COVID
COVID, listen.
Yes.
The growth rate of the economy during COVID fell from 6.5 to below 1. The revenue shortfall.
Yes.
You have to still find $1 billion every year to pay energy costs, the take or pay.
No, what was the revenue shortfall? All those are indicated in the documents that were presented.
The revenue shortfall for which year?
The COVID years you're talking about.
Oh, those are huge shortfalls.
The finance minister went to parliament on an urgent question to answer.
And he said what?
How much we got from COVID, how we spent the COVID money. He told us what we spent on COVID and how much we used to balance the budget. So COVID gave us money, to finance COVID expenditure.
How much did we get from COVID?
Now it could be about a little over 30 billion.
30 billion.
Yes.
CDC. But you know, the what do you call it? The energy take or pay alone, you need to pay $1 billion a year.
But Nana, what has take or pay got to do with COVID?
No, because it's still money. You must generate the money. And so when your revenues have fallen because of COVID, unless you don't agree that COVID had any impact at all, you don't agree.
I have not said so.
Yeah, so if it had
I'm
an
just
impact,
telling you that
if it had one,
the COVID that had an impact gave you 33 billion.
So it wasn't a negative impact; it was a positive impact.
Balance it.
Money. You had money.
Because the finance minister was in parliament.
Do you agree?
And he gave us the details.
No, do you agree that COVID had a negative impact on us? Or you don't agree?
There was some negative
because
impact. Some negative impact.
So when you do the analysis of our debt servicing capacity, you cannot discount the impact of COVID.
Tell me what the impact is. You should be able to tell me that, for example, Nana, you should be able to tell me that, for example,
the revenue shortfall.
Yes, that the revenue shortfall was X. And that had Y effect. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
No, I follow.
Yes, because if a finance minister is telling me that these were my receipts as a result of COVID, I used Y on all COVID expenditure. So he's even saying that my specific COVID expenditure were dealt with by inflows for COVID. And then I got an extra to also balance my budget. So if we're saying that there were revenue shortfalls that affect, then we should be dealing with the data.
Yes.
The numbers.
And so you mean COVID had no impact at all?
No,
but you had a beneficial impact.
And you've asked me this question. I've answered you.
But what you are saying, your view is that COVID's impact was positive.
All I'm trying to tell you is that you are blaming
everything on COVID.
You are blaming your inability to carry a load. There's a tree
on COVID.
There's a tree. They say you.
We'll catch you. But you are also blaming it on incompetence. That's the implication of what you're saying.
I'm saying yes. You told me. That's why I told you that at every point when you borrow, the implication of that borrowing is clear to you. That's like a dashboard.
Yeah.
And I'm sure now you know that.
But then you didn't know that COVID was going to come.
Nana.
Then I won't take it. but
because when you were looking at the dashboard, you didn't know that COVID was going to come. And the impact
I'm telling you that the warnings started coming. And you see, Nana, the worst part is that, the worst part is that when we were shut off the capital market, we still got the Bank of Ghana to even print money for government. Money way above that 3 billion you were going to take from the capital market.
Exactly. Printed more money.
Yes.
But that shows you that COVID did not cover all the shortfall.
Which shortfall?
The shortfall in our revenues.
You couldn't go to the capital market not because of COVID.
But
that's what I'm telling you.
We couldn't go to the capital market because the ratios went out of sync.
Because you couldn't pay.
Now let me, because
I was going to.
Just 2 seconds.
No, I was going to.
Oh, by you 2 seconds. Now because of what Randy is saying, he's my friend. I don't know why this morning he's. No, because of what you are saying, I'm going to read to you what our man told.
Right?
Not 2 seconds. What our man said about COVID and the impact.
Who said?
So
John
Nana, read two things. Read what he said about Africa and read what he said about Ghana.
I've already told you that when he came to Ghana.
What he said
No, you don't get what I'm saying. I'm saying if you read what he
All
said
right.
about Africa,
Yes.
kindly read exactly what he said about Ghana.
I will do what you like. No problem. Like governments, like you know you're my friend. Like governments all over the world, it became necessary for African governments to take action to shield their population from the effects of the COVID pandemic. This meant in many cases an increase in deficits due to unbudgeted expenditures. This has devastated many African economies and sunk them deeper into unsustainable debts. The pandemic has had a very deleterious effect on the economy of African countries. Data from ECA shows COVID-19 created the worst recession in Africa in 50 years, with real GDP shrinking by an average of 3% in 2020. The pandemic is estimated to have dragged about 55 million Africans into poverty. This is John.
So,
then he goes on to say this about Ghana. He says that in my country, Ghana, the country has emerged in poor shape from the COVID experience. So he agrees that Ghana too had it. Then he says, a ballooning deficit, double-digit inflation, nose-diving currency, increasing debt distress are some of the symptoms, which is the same symptoms he has given for Africa. Then he goes on. But Ghana's case is caused by the cavalier handling of the economy by the current administration, unbridled borrowing from the capital market, etc. It says that Ghana went into the pandemic without adequate buffers. Now, when you talk about the effects that COVID has had on Africa, and you talk about the increase in deficits, due to unbudgeted expenditures that have devastated African economy.
So your 2 seconds is up, right?
Give me 1 more second. And sunk them into unsustainable debts. Yes. And the pandemic has generally had a deleterious effect on Africa. And data from ECE, Economic Commission on Africa, shows that it created the worst recession in 50 years and GDP shrinking, all of that. When you say all of that about Africa, then when you come to Ghana, say, as for Ghana there, it was caused by the cavalier handling of the economy.
Okay, so and I just ask you one question on this one.
Yeah.
The recovery from COVID, has it been the same for all African countries?
No, you are not going to have the
post-COVID performance.
Yeah.
Has it been the same for all African countries?
No.
Why?
It will be different.
Why?
Because African economies are different.
Yes. So,
but you take the general.
So there's a general and there's the country specific.
I think, Doc, it's all about.
I agree.
It's all about. I think you want to come in.
Anyway, to be fair to you.
So I think it's all about mismanagement of the economy, right? It is also very clear, and I'm happy to now accept that at the time that we were exiting office, we had a debt of 122 billion Ghana cedis. That's what Mahama, handed over to Nana Akufo-Addo and Akomea.
Okay.
As we speak now, we are into the region of 800 billion Ghana cedis.